Industry lore often treats workplace safety violations just like routine parking tickets, a fixed, highly predictable, and manageable cost of doing business. But a modern inspection by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration can easily generate financial exposure exceeding $1 million. This happens because OSHA does not assess a flat administrative fee for an inspection. They assess penalties for each individual regulatory violation they discover on the floor. And right now, the statutory limits for those individual penalties are sitting at the highest levels in the agency's history. To understand how a routine audit spirals into a seven-figure liability, we must deconstruct the exact mathematics and multipliers OSHA uses to calculate these fines. Operating an industrial facility under outdated assumptions about penalty caps is a structural vulnerability that threatens the survival of the enterprise. Every January, the Federal Civil Penalties Inflation Adjustment Act requires OSHA to raise its fines to match inflation, but a government lapse in Bureau of Labor Statistics data canceled the expected 2026 increase. This chart shows the frozen 2026 penalty caps. The maximum limit for a serious or other than serious violation is locked at exactly $16,550 per citation. The ceiling for willful and repeat violations is capped at $165,514. For a failure to abate, the penalty is $16,550 assessed per day. 10 years ago, the serious maximum was $7,000 and the willful maximum was $70,000. By tying these limits directly to the Consumer Price Index, the 2015 legislation initiated a compounding growth curve that pushes the baseline higher every year the inflation data is available. The flat numbers for 2026 create a phantom ceiling. They mask a compounding baseline that has more than doubled over the last decade. The path to $1 million fine starts with citation stacking. A single physical hazard, like an unguarded piece of machinery, often triggers violations across multiple distinct regulatory standards, such as fall protection, lockout-tagout, and machine guarding. If an inspector documents just 8 to 12 of these related issues as serious citations, the baseline exposure instantly crosses $150,000. The math accelerates further when OSHA applies the per-instance citation protocol. Under this rule, OSHA has the legal authority to issue a separate citation for every individual worker exposed to a hazardous condition, rather than grouping them together into one single fine. Treating every exposed employee as a distinct instance multiplies the base penalty by the exact number of workers on the floor. When applied to violations classified as willful, this multiplier pushes the liability upward in increments of over $165,000 at a time. Total financial exposure scales directly with the quantity of documented hazard instances. The statutory cap only applies to the individual line item, not the final bill. Time is the most expensive variable in the OSHA enforcement formula. A failure to abate violation is issued when an employer misses the strict, agency-mandated deadline to correct a previously cited hazard. Missing this date triggers an automatic penalty of up to $16,550 for every single day the hazard remains uncorrected past the deadline. This accrual mechanic operates completely independently of whatever the original citation cost. Agency guidelines generally cap these daily fees at a maximum of 30 days. 30 days multiplied by the maximum daily fee yields nearly $500,000 in additional fines for a single unabated hazard. Administrative delays and poor post-inspection management convert standard safety citations into catastrophic financial liabilities. The math and the agency's penalty formula maps directly to actual Department of Labor enforcement records. Consider a recent case involving fall protection hazards and the per-instance multiplier. OSHA cited the employer individually for 10 exposed workers at the willful maximum, resulting in a $1.65 million exposure from a single hazard category. A second case highlights the danger of the repeat classification. A documented history of ignoring safety rules across multiple facilities culminated in a January 2025 penalty totaling $4.1 million. A third case demonstrates the agency's response to workplace fatalities. Following a worker death, investigators issued 12 simultaneous willful citations, generating roughly $2 million in proposed penalties. Accruing massive numbers through willful, repeat, or failure to abate classifications automatically triggers placement into OSHA's severe violator enforcement program. Seven-figure fines are never the result of a single maximum citation. They are always the product of compounded multipliers and documented neglect. Lowering these penalties requires algorithmic subtraction, not arbitrary negotiation. OSHA applies specific reduction factors based on employer data. Employers have exactly 15 working days from receiving the citation to formally contest the charges or request an informal conference. Missing this deadline renders the penalty a final, unappealable order. The size reduction allows up to a 70% decrease for small businesses based on headcount. Good faith permits a 25% decrease for maintaining safety systems and correcting hazards. Finally, the history reduction grants a 20% decrease for a clean inspection record. These reductions have limits. A willful violation carries a hard, irreducible floor of $11,823. No combination of adjustments can drop the fine below that statutory minimum. Surviving an OSHA audit is a mathematical defense relying entirely on proactive compliance documentation and strict adherence to administrative response deadlines. The monetary fine issued by OSHA is only the starting point. The indirect costs of a citation frequently exceed the baseline penalty. Because enforcement records are public, a pattern of severe citations will trigger cascading increases in corporate insurance premiums. Placement into the severe violator enforcement program often leads directly to the loss of critical vendor contracts and disqualification from bidding on public projects. OSHA financial exposure is a compounding mathematical threat. It scales with hazard quantity and administrative delay. Subscribe to HSEStudy to master OSHA compliance rules and protect your operations from regulatory risk.